so please bear with us. Good afternoon, everyone. This is one of the final workshops today, but we do hope that we can keep you engaged and interested before the keynote speaker returns. My name's Lorraine Hayes, for anybody that hasn't met me before, and I will start the session, followed by my colleague Helen, who will conclude. As a reminder, this session is aimed for the following people: those who have recently joined the sector, those wishing for a recap or a refresh around using frameworks and the practical application of that. People who may perform procurement but not fully, it may be part of their role at the moment. And also anyone that just wants to refresh or wants to join the group for a general discussion around the topic. Okay, Helen, next slide, thank you. The outline of the workshop, as you can see, we've structured it into two sections. I'll just do the overview, going into the sector, regulations around PCR and looking ahead, and explaining very lightly on frameworks. And then I'll pass over to Helen, and she'll go into using the guides, the HE guides that we have, using framework hints and tips, and offering some of those and going through those with you, calling off and options and process that we have behind that. And then finally, she'll conclude around framework management. We think it should take around 20-25 minutes, but it should leave some time for questions at the end, as Natasha had explained earlier. So, who is UK UPC? We are an organisation that works collectively. We work as a group. Hopefully you've heard of us. We have a dedicated website. The website address is there. We have 6 HE consortia who work individually in a regional basis as well as collaboratively on behalf of the sector to gain even greater advantages through a joined up approach to procurement, thereby reducing duplication and enhancing benefits to members. All of the websites that I've shown on there are worth looking at. There is a lot of information that you can find. We've also got partnerships where we work with Tech and TUCO, and also CPC and GIST join our national strategic groups and quarterly meetings that we have. So moving on, what common ways of working can we confirm to you? Well, our main priorities are helping members with cash flow and process savings, ensuring sustainability and responsible procurement is embedded in our activities, and increasing efficiency. Moving on to the next slide, Helen, please. Catch up. As you can see, just very briefly, we've got NEUPC and NWUPC working collectively today, and rather than go through separate sections, myself and Helen felt this made real sense to just show you the similarities across the North and how we work in unison, really. We do have some variations, a slightly different structure, different teams, and we're based in different locations. Our memberships vary slightly because we have full members and then a different level of members underneath that. Framework numbers and the values that we bring in also vary, but you can see the visions are very, very similar. Thanks, Helen, next week. So, working under the category management structures, which essentially means grouping our HE spend into logical headings, where similar agreements and market trends can be shared and discussed across our membership by those working or interested in those areas. You may have come across some of these groups. The first one that we've listed there is a national category group. It appears where common categories feature across the sector, and a national focus may be needed for members representing the wider network. Some examples are the National Estates category group and IT, we cover IT, but there are a number of others, so do look out for them. Regional category groups do a similar role to the above, but they focus on their regional priorities and impact locally, and may go into more detail around regional membership needs. And then another group that you may be interested in, and again I would recommend that you look out for membership of them, are the tender working parties. These are set up once a new tender delivery programme is about to begin. Members can step forward and contribute to all. Or some of the project activities, they may not want to get involved in every stage. For an example, you may want to help shape strategy, but not get involved in the tender process itself. Or it could be the other way around, where you're not involved in the strategy, but you might step in to get involved in some of the evaluation or the tendering activity, particularly if you have a tender that's aligned for timing in the same year as the framework and you want to call off from it. If you want to know more about joining these groups, do contact us or our category leads, or look at our website to see what projects may be coming in the future 12 months. Myself and Helen work on that regularly to see what the programme looks like and where there are groupings of work where we can make the maximum of our resource. So next one, Helen, please. This one I will not go into detail, and we're probably running out of time, so I'll dictate a little bit. But this just gives you an idea of the different project delivery activities that we have and we go through as teams across the sector. As you know, a re-tender will take a shorter time compared to a brand new agreement, but only if the scope and the requirement has not changed too dramatically. Most projects tend to take between 6 to 12 months to deliver, and that depends on the complexities and the number of stakeholders involved. Institutions have the same constraints, as you will know, around time themselves, either delivering their full tenders or calling off some frameworks. Next one, Helen, please. So this one, really, as you would be aware, this topic is one on its own. It's one that could take most of the day if we felt members were wanting to have more in-depth conversation around it. For this session, because of time again, I've only touched on some of the key activities that are happening at the moment in the UK and across Europe. As you will know, we don't have that luxury, so the focus really is just some of the key points. The contracting authority, for your purposes, is a body governed by public law. Our members often refer to as institutions as a contracting authority in their own right. You can therefore produce your own tenders. Although we are not a not-for-profit organisation owned by its members, you can utilise HE framework agreements because we are all established as central purchasing bodies, meaning we are all contracting authorities providing centralised purchasing activities. We all act on your behalf. The PCR regs were established in 2015 and helped to shape the way we bought goods and services in the EU. Since Brexit, of course, the UK government's legal advisors have updated the PCR regs in their terminology, mainly to adapt wording away from EU and OG references. We await UK new legislation. We have also signed up this year to the WTO, World Trade Organization Treaty, to help with wider trade activities since we separated from Europe and their gateway to trade internationally. This year, a large feedback exercise was performed that some of you may be aware of, and it was linked to a green paper that has now been published and released to the public sector. That was issued to help set out the government's plan for the future. And since then, the Queen's speech also had a large relative section on procurement that covered some of the changes ahead that fed back from that green paper. Also look out for procurement policy notices that come through regularly, and they show the stages of progress that the government is making around this. In addition to this, we have a national legal framework that's just been launched, and I've included the reference there. It will be available on HEC next week, I've been told, because it has actually just been awarded. And from that framework, there will be workshops available. The lead for that contract has provided that this year. That's been essential, and a lot of workshops have been available. So do look out for those, because across the north we share that with our members, and it's key to keep up to date on what's happening in this area. So moving on, what is a framework? Hopefully some of you may know this, whether studying in SIPs or come across it, but basically the definition is there. What is a framework? Well, I've given you the formal definition set out regulations. What it really means is an agreement which sets out the terms and conditions which call-off contracts can be made. The critical point is in itself a contract. There is no commitment to purchase. The key words are establishing the terms governing the contract. Why is this important? Because the contract is formed at an institutional level. It's important that you understand the framework and that has been provided, and you call off your own requirements clearly with the supplier. But Helen will go into that briefly later. I won't touch on that. And here this gives you just the structure of behind frameworks. The foundations of our current frameworks rely on 4 key principles. This is likely to change once the UK government release their legislative changes, but at the moment in the papers that I referred to earlier, the principles ahead are going to be around public good, value for money, transparency, integrity, fair treatment and non-discrimination for suppliers. The whole raft of aspects that we need to factor and incorporate in our new agreement. Right. Helen will be pleased to see this one. That's my section, so what I'll do is pass over to Helen and she'll cover the more practical applications of frameworks. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lorraine. There are many benefits to you of using a framework. Obviously, I would say that. But the first is that we offer you a compliant route to market. If you're spending above the threshold, which is currently £181,000 for supplies and for services, and that's during the life of your contract, then you are required to carry out a full tender process and advertise the opportunity nationally via Find a Tender service as well as Contracts Finder. Now, our category managers have many years of public procurement expertise, and they are there to ensure that every step of that tender process meets all of those UK legislative requirements, and then we can offer you assurance that you have satisfied your obligations. By us conducting that process, it also means a framework can offer you time and process savings. The call-off process is much faster and less admin intensive than a full tender exercise. The evaluation and the tenderer selection has already been completed, so it removes much of the administrative burden from you. We find that now, with all the stakeholder engagement and compliance aspects, an average framework agreement tender process takes us about 9 months to complete. The result of that is that we've already selected the most capable suppliers in the market and agreed both the contractual and the commercial terms. So you should find that using an agreement is a much less intensive process. The purchasing power that you have through collaborating with the full HE sector rather than alone means that you've access to a supplier base of industry leaders, both large organisations and SMEs. You will also achieve more beneficial pricing and contractual terms, which are generally standardised for all institutions, and that's regardless of your individual size. So these terms and conditions are already established, and we ensure that they're set to your advantage rather than that of the supplier. Any negotiation over those terms and conditions will have been done by us prior to award. Throughout the life of the agreement, the consortia takes a strategic approach to its contract management. We meet with our suppliers quite regularly and we monitor KPIs, and we develop their performance and service offering, and will provide you support wherever it's required. We also support you in your sustainability goals through the use of data gathered via the Net Positive tool or similar, and I know that many of you use Net Positive as well within your own institutions, and that's reviewed at contract management meetings. You'll find that all of our framework agreements have accompanying user guides, and those guides will provide you with all the information that you should need to place an order. You'll find the guides, we hold those on the HE contracts database, and that can be accessed directly via HE contracts, or you can access them via our website, which will link to the source information. The guide will cover the scope of the agreement, and so that you know exactly what can and can't be purchased through the framework. It will also detail which consortia have agreed to participate in the framework and were therefore named in the contract notice. So that's particularly important, as within the regulations, you must have been named in the notice to be able to use the agreement. Information will be provided on how to call off from the framework and which suppliers are available for you to use. During our tender process, we set the criteria for award of a supplier, and then you can use that within your call off. The criteria and the scores are included in the user guide, so you don't need to repeat that exercise. We give you all the information to see, so that you can see what we've asked and what's been answered. To make your call off process run smoothly, contact details of your consortium rep and all the suppliers involved are available. Now, one of the key features of that guide is the price list for suppliers and an outline of any of the discount structures that they have applied. And then finally, as I mentioned, you can obtain the full ITT documents that includes the questions asked, the answers given, and the scores apportioned. So you've got full visibility, and that should hopefully give you the tools that you need to make your call off quite quick and effective. When you pick up the user guide or our tender documents, you need to make an assessment of 4 commercial criteria, and that's your starting point. So does the framework offer you the right supplier base to meet your requirements? And you need to take into consideration the complexity and the scale of your requirement and the market. Is the scope of the framework sufficient to cover your requirements? Does it offer you that level of choice that you need in terms of the goods, services, or works that are available? Obviously, everyone's key concern is value for money. So you do need to factor in the cost of undertaking the full procurement exercise. As we said, that's about 9 months for us. So although the price is not the only consideration, it is a very important one, especially when budgets are constrained. You need to check whether that pricing is still competitive. We should have made sure that the framework has kept up with market forces, and that's something that our category managers monitor regularly. So also remember that you might be able to get some additional volume discounts, and that's something you can attract at a local level through using the framework and by giving an indication of what your volumes could be. You need to look at whether the terms and conditions that apply to calling off are acceptable for your institution. Now, this is really important, particularly when you're working on complex requirements and particularly when we're looking at ERDF. So we work very hard to satisfy the requirements of ERDF, and we'll offer you all the information that you might need to support an audit. You do need to be confident, though, that any complex funding requirements are met. If you've got any queries, though, please do contact any of the category managers. They're there to answer your questions, provide you with market knowledge, supplier intelligence, or information about how to gain the best value from the agreement. So a couple of times now, myself and Lorraine have used the term calling off. So that's basically procurement speak for placing an order. There are set processes to guide you through calling off from an agreement, and I'll cover those briefly later on. The key thing that you need to remember is that a framework is not a formal contract. So that seems strange, I know, because we set up the terms and the conditions, and we do sign formal documentation with suppliers, but because there's no guarantee of expenditure through an agreement, it's not a formal contract. However, when you issue your purchase order to the supplier, that's when the contract gets formed, as you have committed to a certain value of business. Therefore, it's really important that you reference the framework on your purchase order to make sure that you get the preferential rates and the terms that have been applied to the agreement. I'll go over a couple of the processes now that you can follow for your call off. So one of those processes is the further competition, or it's sometimes called the mini competition. So this process is used when the terms of the agreement are left a bit open to allow you to refine the specification, and then you can make sure that it meets your organisation's specific needs. It allows you to agree institutional service levels and to achieve more competitive pricing through commitment of volumes. It gives you some budget certainty to allow for improved local budget planning and the potential for added value services in return for that longer term commitment. It also allows you to improve your market understanding and your knowledge through interaction with multiple suppliers. So in this process, you would issue a mini competition document and you'd send that to all the suppliers awarded to the agreement, specifying your personal institutional requirements. You'd then evaluate the supplier responses that you get back and you'd utilise the award criteria that we've set out in the user guide. As I've said, anything that we've asked and scored, you don't need to repeat that. But if there's anything specific that you need more information about, that's when you put it in the mini competition. A little bit more straightforward process is the direct award. So where the requirement can be easily met by the framework specification and where all your institutional needs are satisfied already, you can direct award under the agreement. So this is the most effective use of time and effort, and is particularly suitable to fixed price agreements and where no amendments to the terms are necessary. It's also used when the consortia has appointed a sole supplier to either the lot or sometimes the whole framework. On occasions where a framework is ranked, you direct award to the highest ranking supplier as they have been determined as offering you the best value. You should avoid this approach where pricing is dynamic or it's subject to any market fluctuations. You might not then get the best deal. But if you are unsure as to whether this approach is the right one for you, then obviously please ask the specific category manager or anybody within the consortium will be happy to help you. So just to make things a little bit more interesting, you can choose a third process, and it's kind of a hybrid really of the two previous ones. It's called the desktop exercise. Many of our agreements will contain what we call a desktop calculator as part of the guidance information. And this is in a spreadsheet format, and it's used as a tool to allow you to amend the weightings by a set amount to better reflect your institutional requirements. So for example, if sustainability is a priority for your institution, and say we'd weighted it 20% at tender, you could use the desktop calculator to alter that weighting and ensure that you could then award to the supplier that has scored highest in this area. This method allows you to prioritise your requirements, but in a quicker way, as you don't need to conduct a full mini competition. But do be careful, there are rules around using this approach and not all agreements permit it. So do look out for what it says in the user guide. When you come to awarding your contract, whatever method you use, you will issue a purchase order. I mentioned already, it's really important, this clearly references the framework agreement, and if you can, put the title, the reference number, preferably both, and state that the relevant framework terms and conditions apply. You also need to put on here the timescales that you're calling off for. So if it's a longer term purchase rather than ad hoc requirement, put that on the purchase order as well. And be consistent in stating your requirements on that purchase order so that they reflect anything that you've sent out previously to suppliers through a mini competition. We have issued the suppliers with terms and conditions that govern the relationship between the supplier and yourselves. There are a couple of areas in that you can refine, things like delivery days. So have a look at that paperwork and issue that with your order. Our advice would always be don't sign anything from the supplier. It will always be to their benefit, not necessarily yours. So we do state in our tender documents that institutional terms and conditions take precedence where applied, so you can put those in if you wish. One question that we frequently get asked is around the duration of call-offs. So it's really useful to remember that although a framework has a maximum term of 4 years in duration, except in certain circumstances like long-term IT purchases, this doesn't apply at the call-off stage. You can start your call-off at any point during the term of the framework. It can ask for any duration, and it can actually exceed the date of the framework agreement. The only stipulation with that is that you've done it fairly and transparently, and that you haven't done it to distort competition. So contract management is the most important part of the procurement life cycle, and each agreement is managed by one of our experienced category managers, and they've got a great understanding of the agreement, the suppliers, and the market in which they operate. Our agreements are prioritised for this purpose based on risk, usage, and value. And category managers will meet with suppliers for review meetings, and there they'll discuss performance against KPIs, any emerging trends in the market, changes to the organisation that impact delivery of the contract, and importantly, any financial risks. They'll provide suppliers with feedback from members, so it's really important that you let us know if you're having any issues or if you've had a really good service from a particular supplier. And we do encourage members to take part in review meetings, so if that's something that you'd like to do, please contact the relevant category manager and they can let you know what the dates are. We do also ask for representation from our partner consortia so that we have a national approach. A key part of contract management is responsible procurement, and we use the net positive supplier engagement tool to identify potential negative impacts as well as any positive initiatives run by the supplier. So that information is all recorded in their action plan, and that action plan is discussed at each review meeting, and we do expect to see progress throughout the duration of the agreement. So it's vital to us that our suppliers provide you with excellent service, so we do manage our frameworks very closely, and we hope that we quickly address any service issues, and as well to develop the suppliers so that we can help to enhance their performance. So thank you very much for listening. We've given you a quick overview here. If you've got any further questions, then please do contact one of the category managers from either consortium or myself and Lorraine, and we'll be very happy to answer any of your queries.
Thanks very much. There's no questions come in from either platform at the moment. I think because we've slightly overrun, it's probably best if there are any questions, if you can contact us either on the platform or the consortia directly. So thank you very much, Helen and Lorraine, for the presentation. And sorry to everyone else for the technical difficulties. I'll hand over to Tasha now just to close off the session.
Yep. Again, thank you, Lorraine and Helen, for your time. So the next session that we have is our closing keynote speaker, Colin McLaughlin. So please head back to the agenda to log on to the next session there. There will still be time later as well to visit the exhibition, so please do drop in and say hello in the chat function there too. But other than that, thank you everybody and see you later.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you, bye.